And we are live on Oz Property Investors. We bring the big names and we have the big fun. And we've got not an old friend. We've got a friend of the show who hasn't been on.
Very old.
No. Bushy, it's going to be a fantastic session. We're going to unlock financial freedom because many people are the average investors and trying to get up to that financial freedom. So it's going to be a huge session, and we're going to unpack later in the show. Is it too late to invest, whether you're sort of 40, 45? But that is a bit of the dessert. So stay tuned for that. But Bushy, how you going, man? What's happening?
Yeah, loving life, guys. Never a dull moment in property, as we all know. So, I'm always enjoying what's happening. There's always something new happening. We've sort of rolled out a few new things in response to what's happening in the marketplace, which we'll talk about if we've got time. But really excited and very humble to join you guys. Love what you guys are doing. I think people are sick of bullshit in property because there's a lot of it. And what I think really resonates with what you guys have always done is it's just true, raw, authentic. You say how it is. I love listening to the show. It's no wonder you've got such a massive audience as a result of that. So we're very humble to join you again, guys.
Awesome.
Mate, we're pumped to have you. It's
how are you going?
2 years.
Oh, it's 3 years.
Is it been 2 years?
3 years.
Yeah.
3 years? No, surely not.
Yeah. Oh, maybe that.
I'm very good. I'm very good.
Yeah.
I'm very good, mate. How are you? How's Jeff?
I'm good. I had a haircut. Nobody noticed, but still, it's not hiding the grave, but that's okay. We're all good. I'm excited. I'm energetic, and I think there's an exuberance amongst the property space because there is very likely going to be a rate cut next Tuesday, but I think there won't be as many as what we suspect because
I agree.
I saw the RBA cash rate tracker, and just with that little deal they've got between Trump and China now, or US and China, that sort of 10% thing, I think that'll sort of settle things down a touch. But anyway, that's beside the point. Excited to be here, and just for those who've not seen Bushy, you are effervescent and evergreen, Bushy. So there's absolutely you're going to be green throughout winter, but you are you are a successful property investor. You got that 200k lifestyle income. You said maybe it's 300k now, maybe you haven't updated it with inflation, but you're the founder of Know How Property Finance and podcaster of multiple podcasts that are amazing. Been doing it for years, for decades, maybe not decades because podcasts haven't been around that long, but you've got the Freedom Formula as well, and top 10 property specialist. And I think to put a cherry on top, 2,000 people you've helped, over $1 billion of loans. So is there anything Bushy can't do?
Is it billion or is it 2 billion?
I'm learning every day, guys. Learning every day. So that's the beauty of property. There's never a day where you can't learn something. If you're not learning something, then you're going backwards.
Yeah, it's so true. It's funny that you say that because we were just chatting off air and Bushy's like, I'm interviewing a 16-year-old to learn about, his views and thoughts on property because he's a property fanatic. And it's like, you're learning from a 16-year-old. It's like, yes, there are insights and values on someone's always got something valuable to say that you can all learn from and take away. And I guess that's why this show exists, right? We interview everyone from every position, but you've interviewed everyone from all walks of property life, really.
I know, and that's part of the joy for me because the property is just not about property. That's what I find, and I'll talk about this in a bit more detail shortly. But I think sustainable success in whatever format you're looking at lies at the intersection of self-help and wealth. And if you're just focusing on wealth and you're not focusing on self and health, and when I say self, it's mindset, outlook, attitudes, beliefs, biases. There's more happening inside that's holding us back than there is outside, in my view. So if we haven't got ourselves sorted, there's no way we're going to get it sorted in the property world either.
It's interesting. There was Alex Harmozy said, you are not making $1 million because you don't know. What was it? I'm going to butcher it now. This is the problem about being live. We can't cut it out. But he's like, the knowledge that you don't have to be a millionaire is costing you $1 million. So go get that knowledge so that you can become a millionaire, because it's all out there now, right? Like there's a lot of information out there that you can go get to learn to become a millionaire if that's what your goal is. A lot of people, it's not, and that's fine.
Oh, I think we've moved from the information age to the insight age. I think the value now is in information because there's too much information. Property is no exception, by the way. We're as close as we've ever been to a perfect market, given the deluge of information we've got our hands on. And we're actually starting to see market movers in property that I've never seen before, because there is so much data occurring, and that's aligning with the massive uptake in high-profile property promoters, whether they be hosts of shows, some buyers agents who talk a great story and are more interested in building their own empire at the investor's expense. But we are starting to see that activity. I've never seen that before, but there is the ability now to sway what people are doing and where they're doing it, and create a self-fulfilling prophecy and property that's never been able to be achieved before.
Interesting. Wow. And this is only in the first 5 minutes. So let's get into it. There's so much wealth to unpack, and raw wealth really as well. So I wanted to know, on that note though, what is stopping people today with all that information, the ability that markets are potentially being moved, whether they are or not? People didn't say that to us off the record. Now it's not off the record because I just said it. But is it the same thing that's stopping people today as it was 5 to 10 to 15 years ago, or is it different reasons? Like, what are the reasons people aren't becoming financially free?
There's 1,000 excuses, but it all comes back to one simple cause, and I've touched on already. It's what's between our ears. We are more fear-driven now because we're on instantly 24/7. We've always got something in our hand, and the only way people can get the cut through to grab our eyeballs and our earbuds is to scare the living shit out of us. Because fear sells, it always has. We've always been, we are built to respond more quickly to fear than we are to opportunity. Fear sells. So we are drowning in fear, and sadly, because there is so much of that happening, particularly at the mainstream media level, then that's scaring the horses. So we all know, if you look at the fundamentals of property, it's never been better. There's actually never been a better opportunity than what we're currently looking at, given all of the major movements that are occurring. But that fear factor is scaring people. There's plenty of ability out there. There's plenty of opportunity out there. It's just that people aren't taking the time, or making the time, or haven't got the time to actually break through that and get down to the fundamentals of what the good gold information is. There's a lot of crap information out there, but those who take the time and listen to shows like yours and do some reading and get very focused about where they're getting their information, taking action and reaping the rewards. So it's never changed. There's always 1,000 excuses, but the major excuses, people are just too scared to do it, and they don't know who to trust, and they don't know where to start.
Yeah, it's hard. Like I was chatting with an investor today, and the questions were like, oh, well, there's, comparing the regions like Queensland and Victoria. Oh, there's a land tax. Oh, but the government just released this new, scheme for first home buyers. And then, but what about land tax? And then what about the, what was the other one? There's so many little things that, like, I'm like, that's not even relevant. Like, what are you talking about? Doesn't affect it in any way. It's like, yeah, but they're bringing a lot of migration. I'm like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Bad thing, because these people, I'm like, oh God, this is scary. I'm scared. I don't want to be in your head.
If you've got a negative outlook, you're going to see everything as negative. So the set of glasses that you're wearing is how you're going to perceive the world. And again, we'll touch on this tonight, but perception is a massive part of it. The frame that we look at the world and the way we filter the world, well, you and I can look at exactly the same information and read it a completely different way and act completely differently. The ones who overcome fear with real knowledge, because I think the best way to overcome fear is just to dive in, get invested in your knowledge. Once you've got the knowledge, you've got clarity, you've got comfort, you can take some action because you know what you're doing. Simple as that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw a curveball.
Go on
Sorry,
there. Curveball it up, Jeff.
I was going to say, because I think this is too. I mean, I don't mind the politeness. Politeness is good, but I just want to say, because the challenges that, and well, no, not politeness, but I like to sort of keep it a bit spicy, a bit on edginess. So the thing that I see a lot of people are really kind of, and it does come back to mindset. I do agree there, but then there's the constraint of borrowing capacity. Property prices are too high. The mortgage repayments are 60%. I mean, and somebody told me that was a fact today, and I sort of thought, well, in the areas where there's below average property. So there's all these kind of is information molding around in our heads. So what does borrowing capacity kind of look like in today's sort of environment, Bushy? Because that's probably the biggest objection that people have. And we'll go into that more, but just quickly, how do people sort of start to think about overcoming that borrowing capacity? Is it information?
Yes, partly that. For those investors who have been in it for a while, it's not hard to be maxed out. There's no question, particularly in the current environment. But for those who haven't started, there's no excuse, quite frankly, because if you're buying in your backyard, yes, if you live in the heart of Melbourne and the heart of Sydney, then of course, if you're kicking off, it's going to be hard yards. It really is. You're going to have a big battle with the deposit, and depending what your income level is, for property prices in those locations, you're in strife. But there's 15,000 suburbs and 11 million properties in this country, guys, as we all know. Yep. There will be somewhere that's still ticking the right boxes where you can get on the ladder. And where there's a will, there's a way. So, it's easy for me to say this because I've been doing this for donkeys, but it wasn't much different when I started back in the 90s. I didn't have 2 cents to rub together. No, I literally divorced, burnt out, broken, didn't have a cracker. I had to get really inventive to do it. So I found someone who gave me some money to get in the deposit. And I knew I worked out what I needed to earn to get the borrowing capacity. So I went out and found work that was going to give me that level of income. It's a matter of getting clear on what you're trying to achieve and then knowing what you have to do and then just doing it. If you're serious enough, you'll find a way. There's no question about that. If we come back to the borrowing capacity, though, for people who've been in it for a while, it is a struggle. So, there's no surprise that we're all looking for rate drops, and, no one can give you any guarantees on that. I agree with you, Jeff. I don't think there's going to be as many or as much as what people would like to think, because the RBA needs to keep a fair bit of powder in reserve, given the Trump dump that is continuing to throw uncertainty into relations around the world, and that there may well be some ripple effects from that. So I think they'll be much more conservative than what we would like. But I also know that banks are businesses like every other business, and we're seeing them soften off in terms of their policies and getting a bit more hungry behind the scenes. So there's off-market rate drops. They're starting to soften some of their policies. There's a fair bit of pressure by a number of groups to get serious about the 3% rate buffer that's being added to everyone at the moment, because it doesn't make sense anymore. Yes, in a rising market, I can sort of get it, but there's layer upon layer upon layer of risk protection built into the financing piece these days, where it's got to the point where it just doesn't make any more sense. So the market forces will drive that. It won't be just rate drops that are going to help us. There will be a softening because banks are hurting. They're not writing enough business. They're very good at making money, and their loan books are a big chunk of what they do. So if they're finding it tough, they'll find a way.
It's interesting you say that, because we saw very recently AMP had that. They introduced the 10-year interest only, and they even said for owner occupiers, which is, I'm not going to say it's unheard of, but it's quite uncommon to see that comfort level, and it's at lower LVRs. So you're talking 60-70% loan to value ratio. So so you're not going leveraging to 90 to 95% with that sort of deal. But it's just interesting to sort of see that creep in at the edges. But it's interesting I said that as well, because somebody said, I have made over 300K growth. I didn't even read this comment before I asked the question. In my PPR I'm renting, however, I run the figures for a 570K house, and I will be out of pocket 20K a year from borrowing PPI equity from second investment property. And that's what we'll sort of talk to. talks quite nicely to some of the case studies of what the average investor versus the, I suppose, sophisticated or ones that are getting to financial freedom. But we could riff on this question for the whole, well, not so many questions, more of a statement. But yeah, where do you want to go from here, Joe? What's up next? Maybe some slides. What do you reckon?
Yeah, well, Bushy, we're talking about the tale. Are we talking about the tale of two investors? Have we got a bit of a story coming along, or?
Yeah, we have. I just want to sort of, and again, it'll the people listening to this. I know you attract a fairly sophisticated investment audience, which is awesome. So your regulars are pretty active investors, and that's a great community. But I like to sort of paint the picture from extreme. So I'm going to paint the picture of the average first-time investor and what that means as far as what it looks like. And then I'm going to sort of paint the complete contrast of that in terms of the approach that I think people should adopt. And it's certainly an approach that has worked very well for myself and all of the investors that we've helped over the years. The thing I'll say about that, though, before we start, guys, before we jump into the subject, I still find that there's way too many people that focus on the property and not the process.
Yeah.
And I'll start talking process, and there'll be lots of people listening to this tonight. The eyes will glaze over and their ears will start to shut down. When that happens, that's your cue to know that if it's occurring and you don't wake yourself up, that's a big part of why you might not be achieving the goals that you thought you were going to. Because the 5% of investors that achieve sustainable success do focus on the process and on the people before they even think about looking at the property side. So it's a clear differentiator. The sexy bit's the property. You guys would have heard people say if your investing is exciting, you're probably not making any money, because really good investing is as boring as batshit.
Yeah,
and so it could be.
It's funny. I bought a motorbike about a year ago, and I bought it at an auction. And the same day, I was buying my own property as well. And the property was the block of units, I think, and it was like $1,015,000, and the motorbike was like $5,000. And I was more stressed out buying the $5,000 motorbike than I was the $1 million property. And it was this weird juxtaposition of like, what the hell is going on? I'm spending $5,000. I don't know if it's a great motorbike. There might be some issues with it. Whereas the property, I had all of the information, but it's just a weird thing. So yes, if you are getting incredibly excited, good, that's good as well. But if you are also like, I don't really care, it's just an asset. That's my view on all of this. Like I don't care if it's it's property. It's just a thing. It's there as a wealth accumulation vehicle for me, not
it's the means to the end. It's the vehicle that's going to get it there. It's the
vehicle
fuel that it is totally the vehicle. I've often said if kebabs were giving me better growth and a better return, I'd invest in kebabs. But it just so happens that property is the best asset in Australia that's going to help you get there. So if you're getting excited and you're getting emotional, then again, I'll keep circling back to this. If emotion's kicking in, that's where you're going to really struggle, because those emotions will get in the way of logic and rational thinking, and before you know it, you'll be making decisions that you didn't think you were going to make that get yourself into hot water. So that's really key. But shall we kick in? I had a false start there. I keep distracting myself. Yes. And if I can get this bloody thing to work. Let me see. Here we go. So let's kick in, guys. I'm going to call it a bit of a sliding doors moment, because, and there's probably not too many of the audience who watch the movie Sliding Doors, but it's a movie with Gwyneth Paltrow where the movie talks about her taking two separate courses of action with completely different outcomes. I'm just going to run a very similar scenario with this one, and therefore. We'll have an investor who takes the typical route, which is a bit of a Speedy Gonzales type exercise, trying to get there in a massive hurry but doesn't worry about any of the detail, versus the smart, educated investor who takes a much more strategic approach to how we put things together. So jumping into that, just to put some real shape around who we're talking about. We're talking about Jess and Michael Jones. And these are fictitious, by the way. Their names have been changed to protect the innocent, like we should. They're in their early 40s. Jess is an engineer. She's earning just under 200 grand a year. Michael's the stay-at-home dad, and he's a part-time public servant, so he's earning about 44 grand. They've got some super combined. They've got some shares. They've got some funds starting to pull on the offset, and their home's currently worth about 1.2. They live in WA, and they've got a 615 grand home loan, a 10 grand credit card, and a couple of kids. So that's who they are. In terms of their profile, they're extremely time poor, like most Aussies. Very conservative on their outlook, quite risk averse, so they don't want to take any risks. They've got very little property knowledge, don't know where to start or who to trust, and they're pretty keen to play it safe because they just don't want to put anything at risk. Which is, I don't know about you guys.
This is the interesting thing about these guys is, like, if you go back to the slide before, they have what, a $600,000 PPOR, $615,000 home loan on their property. So I imagine they probably bought that place for $900,000, and it's grown $400,000 for their owner occupier. So it's amazing how many owner occupiers are sitting on an absolute gold mine of equity without even knowing, like, yes, you can use that. If you've got $200,000 of value, you can take out 80% of that value potentially if you've got the serviceability. But people just don't know that's a thing. Go on,
Jeff.
I think for the average person, though, it's important that it's easy for us to sit up here on a stage, and we're not on a stage, but it's easy for us to say, like, look, the average person is concerned because, you know, debt is risk and all that. So it's not so much, I don't think it's necessarily awareness. I mean, maybe it is awareness, but I think it's more about the lack of kind of knowing what's behind the numbers. And if the push came to shove, that yes, there are ways that you can still probably protect yourself. It's probably that conservative nature, because it's kind of that we still have that mentality of, we sort of pay down the home loan and get that sorted, and then start to invest. I think that still is quite pervasive to some extent. We're sort of in a bit of an echo chamber here, but maybe that's
and you guys know that, you know, and I'm sure you have the same conversations, but when someone says to me, I want to pay the home off first and then I'll invest, I'll say, well, you might be surprised to hear that if you invest first, you'll pay off your home a hell of a lot sooner, because we're going to channel all the surplus into eliminating non-deductible debt. So you get the keys back to the house 10 to 15 years earlier than what you would have, and you've got an asset that's growing in value that's going to help fund your retirement. So it's, a lot of people scratch their head and go, what do you mean? How can I do that? That's, if we've set the structure up right, that's exactly what ends up happening. We will pay off that non-deductible home loan years earlier than what you will if you just try and pay it off using after-tax money. So you can actually have your cake and eat it too if you're smart about how you put this thing together. So let's kick on with these guys. And good point, Joe. And again, I'm sure you do this as well, but quite often when people show concerns, I'll say, well, what did you buy your house for? What's it worth now? You've just made yourself 300 or 400 grand. Why wouldn't it be any different if we buy the right property to invest that's going to add to that? Because it's their only lived experience, basically, that they often probably just don't realise when they have a look at that. So let's have a look at the typical approach. And I'm going to dance through this one pretty quickly because I just don't want to bore people to death. But they've heard about property. You couldn't help but hear about property because it's about all the newspapers have got to talk about. To scare us with these days is property, which is great for property. But all their friends and neighbours are buying them. They don't want to miss out. Their accountant says, yeah, you better buy a property to save some tax. How many times have you heard that, guys? But they want to get a cheap property pretty close to where they live, because they don't want to get too far out of their comfort zone. And I've actually heard that south of Perth is a bit of a hotspot. So their ears are pricking up because it's not too far from where they are. So they end up going and buying an old cheap 2-bed unit for 450 grand. It's giving them $430 a week rent. It's in a group of 6 in that nearby hotspot zone. They go to their bank and they borrow the lot with because they want the lowest rate, of course. So they get a P&I loan, no LMI, and they they do the old serviette exercise, which I see a lot of investors do. They go, okay, $430 a week rent minus the $502 in loan repayments. That means it's only going to cost me $72 a week. Yeah, that's okay. That's pretty damn good. I'm off to the races. And why would we waste the money on a property manager? Because we live pretty close. We're only half an hour from it, so we'll look after that ourselves. Happy days. I mean, what could go wrong? What could go wrong? Yep, exactly. So reality kicks in though. From day one, suddenly they're starting to get a bit of a hole in their pocket. Spending a lot of time on the property managing all the tenant issues and the tenants coming and going and not paying rent and all the palaver that goes with it. Then they rock up to the accountant at tax time. He actually runs all the numbers based on all the costs involved in the property, and suddenly he makes them aware that they're actually 31 grand a year in the red, and that's pre the tax refund. So they're going to get about 7 grand back in tax on that property, which is not bad, but they're having to wait for a year to get that. So in the meantime, it's costing them just shy of $600 a week out. Then in 5 years' time, because they didn't know it, but they bought at the peak of the market and things have sort of softened off and gone a bit sideways. So it's only gone up about 3% on average. No surprise, all the pain. They assumed it was going to go up on a linear pathway year after year, which I still hear a lot of investors say. So 5 years in, they go, this is too hard, it's too painful, we're not making enough out of it, it's costing us money, sell the bloody thing. Let's get what did we do wrong? So what did we do wrong, guys? Tell me, what did we do wrong?
Well, I think for me, based on the hotspot. You know, someone said, the newspaper said, the article said, buy in this area because it's grown 60, 70% already. That's amazing. That's one of the things I see a lot. These hotspot markets start to get like a second wind from, the media, because news.com and realestate.com has the data's in. It's grown 40% this year. And it's like, yeah, but that might be a time to move on to the next one. Not necessarily saying it is. You know, if there's the supply and demand metrics there, but for me, it's just not being smart about where you purchased. And property management by yourself, don't get a property manager. They don't charge much
unless you're really interested in doing it, and are prepared to.
Even then, Jeff, my wife used to own and run a very successful property management business, and. She's still got a finger on the pulse. It is so litigious and so the legislation is now, first and foremost, looks after the tenant. If you don't have someone who knows the legislation to the nth degree, you're putting yourself in a very dangerous position, potentially very costly position, because you've only got to miss a couple of key dates and suddenly you're not protected at all, because it's all going to slant to the tenant. I just wouldn't take the risk for that. It's probably going to cost you 4 cups of coffee a week to have your property managed. That's about what it's going to equate to. It's something like that. So if someone wants to give themselves a second job when they don't have any time, and they're prepared to put a very expensive asset at the risk of a few cups of coffee a week, good luck with that.
So someone's jumped in. Tim jumped in the comments. No advice, no property management, no knowledge. Just went in blind. Did what they were told by a friend at the barbecue situation. What's the answer?
Great comment. There's a bunch, and I won't dwell on this too much. But number one, buying the cheapest property close to home. The big assumptions that still I'm staggered at some of these, but I'd still find a lot of people assume that all properties and banks are pretty much like commodities, so they're all going to perform and grow the same. So we just need to get the cheapest. That is still just amazes me how much that thought still pervades. And of course, they bought the wrong type of property in the wrong area at the wrong time. Not saying that it's easy to buy at the right time, because you only know that in hindsight, and it's like buying shares. You never know when the bottom or top was until after the event, but you can still stack the deck in your favour. They thought they could do it better themselves, but really didn't know what they didn't know. They focused on the lowest rate loan, and it was principal interest. So it was a low rate loan, but the costs of actually holding the property increased pretty substantially. They hadn't factored in all the costs because they didn't sit down and work them out. They bought them in joint names, so they missed out on a bunch of tax credits that could have really softened the blow for them. They didn't know what the property needed to do other than make money. That was pretty much the extent of their strategy. So if you sum that up, and I could talk a lot more about this, but they didn't crunch the numbers and they didn't have a strategy. And that really is just the tip of the iceberg. I just wanted to sort of set the tone on that. And again, I know that most people listening to this show will be way beyond that, but I'll guarantee there are people on this show who have friends, family, and work colleagues who are thinking about getting into property. Talk to them. Make sure they don't go down that pathway. Help them. You've if you're listening, you've probably. And I made a lot of these mistakes myself, by the way, when I started off. So it was pretty easy for me to put this together because I didn't trust anyone. I wanted to reinvent the wheel, and I was making expensive mistakes, and I didn't even know it until after the event. But there's no excuse now. There is so much good information through your show and others that can help people to do that. If you really want to pay it forward, then talk to others to get them on the same pathway. And I think the other thing is that there's a lot of wrong assumptions still about property. Again, the focus is on the property and the sexy bit, and the assumption that they all perform the same. The other thing that I touched on before is that there's this sort of unvoiced assumption that property is going to go up in value year on year in a linear fashion. Now, we've sadly, particularly for people who've got into property post-COVID, we've lived in, that's been the second highest property boom in the 260-year history of Australia, guys. That's, that is massive. And it's created this artificial feeling that, wow, anyone can make money in property. You just got to buy one and sit back and let it do it. We're about to find out in a big hurry. I think things are, I hate using the word normal, but they're returning to more normal conditions. And there'll be a lot of areas that will flatline if they don't have future growth drivers attached. And I'll touch on what those growth drivers are a bit later on. And I know you guys have talked about them. I've loved your series on the 150 grand passive portfolio you guys are putting together. That's absolute gold, guys. I love it. It's really
we might be doing a Reno update on in a couple of weeks. So if you want to see a Reno, I'm putting Joe on the spot now. You might not do it, but no. So Bushy is one of those reasons you see behind why prices might not continue to rise, and we'll share more of these later. So stay tuned. But is it that affordability of the area, essentially based on the incomes? Is that sort of what you're seeing that may hold some areas back? Talk, for example, one you probably know quite well is, I don't know which part of Adelaide you're from, but places like your Morphett Vales, and which were even Hackham, although they were sort of seen as sort of very lower, some parts of it lower socioeconomic, and even Elizabeth, like you were picking those properties up for 150, 200 in the 2020s, early 2020s, and now they're like sort of 450, 500. But I think those areas now, they probably just don't necessarily have the fun. I mean, great areas potentially, but the affordability is not quite there. Is that one of the things that you feel may hold some areas back now?
Yeah, a couple of things, and it's a good thought, Jeff. I think we've seen the great affordability catch up. That's what I'm calling it. And the reason why Perth and Adelaide have boomed is because they look so cheap compared to the eastern states, and there's a number of things that have come together to do that. So what COVID has done, pre-COVID, if you couldn't physically see a person and see a property, you didn't buy it. That was pretty much the approach. Post-COVID, everyone has got used to what we're doing right now, and therefore they don't have to be there. They don't have to see it. They're much more comfortable, and there's much more data available that has made it very easy for people to go, right, well, it's really cheap in Perth. Let's go and buy a property there. So, and Adelaide's been a big winner on that score as well. And we're seeing this affordability crosshairs move around the country. I know I've heard Darwin being talked about in recent times, and man, come on, guys, get serious. It's and that self-driven activity I spoke about, all of the people talking about it will drive it. It'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy for a short period, but sustainable growth needs to be on the back of future change improvements. So income is one of them, but income will come in behind new infrastructure, and new industry. So if all you do is focus on areas, and there's so much free information on the web to find out where new committed infrastructure is going, talking about roads, rail, technology, industries. There's so much information out there about what's happening in the industry front, because industry brings jobs, which brings incomes, and incomes will then support it. So I talk about the 3 I's, infrastructure, industry, incomes. If you focus on those in an area that's got scarcity, and then overlay that with the thing that COVID has enabled things to happen is to overcome sentiment. So using those, what I mean by that, Jeff, is that you mentioned Hackham, you mentioned Elizabeth and areas like that. There's a sentiment factor. If you lived in Adelaide and you've been in Adelaide, you wouldn't touch Hackham with a 40-foot pole, and you'd run from Elizabeth.
You don't stop at the lights driving through Elizabeth, apparently, but we used to. I mean,
there's cars up on blocks. There's but sight unseen with buyers agents who don't care have pumped people into those areas because the numbers look great and the data looks good, but the sentiment factor. And you guys will be the same. When I buy a property, I'm thinking about who I'm going to sell it to. That's my major driver, is who am I going to sell this to? Not how am I buying, but who am I going to sell it to? And I want to sell it to an owner-occupier who's buying with their heart and emotion because she's heard the area is great and is in a great school catchment zone, and it looks great from the street, and the kitchen and the bathroom look awesome. That's how I'm going to position that property to sell down the track, not tick all the investment grade boxes that I hear a lot of people talk about. So that future focus is the key bit here that I don't think there's enough of. And the only thing that's going to maintain sustainable growth in areas is driven by those 3 I's, supported by the demographics, supported by population growth that will get sucked in behind the industry and the infrastructure, because they actually becomes a sort of a self-reinforcing exercise when you get those 3 I's happening. If you focus on those areas, you're going to be okay. But there's a lot of other areas who are now run out of steam just because we've had the pandemic petrol poured on it. That fuel's just about burnt out. There'll be a lot of areas that have done the catch up, and now they'll probably soften off a bit. Actually, well, I'm not going to be surprised to see 5 or 10% soften off in some of those locations. And then they'll pretty much flatline or go sideways for a considerable period of time.
Here we go.
What are your thoughts on the ABS data? So I believe the most recent ABS data was 2021, 2022 when it came out, the census data. So that's kind of just as COVID's happening, and that's one thing I'm seeing a lot of is the affordability in the areas that there are areas that are starting to shift, and the numbers say, oh my gosh, this place is terrible, but then the 3 I's are saying, no, this is amazing, and we're not going to know until 2026 when we get 2027 when we get the results from the next census. So it's like I'm seeing people saying, well, look, the statistics don't speak here. I'm like, well, yeah, you got to we're looking at 2021 examples.
You don't drive the car looking through the rear view mirror, and that's what a lot of property people do. It's no wonder they crash, because they're looking at stuff that's happened in the past. We need to, and the future data is not as easy to get. It is out there. It means scrolling through federal, state, and local government to find out where the infrastructure is going. But it's all there. It's all there for free. You just got to take the time to find it. So, and those who are serious about it will do that.
Everyone, I think now has ChatGPT. There's an amazing function on ChatGPT called deep research. I don't know if I pay for ChatGPT.
Yeah, only the upgrade,
so I don't know.
4.
That's the upgraded one. Well, it's $20, $20 US a month. So what's that? $30 a month. Just pay for it. But I was playing around with it, and you can do deep research. I did it actually. Am I dropping this too early? But we're looking at building a rooming house on one of the developments that we purchased for the $150,000 passive income. And nice. I was like, I've got to chat to the town planner. I'm doing that on Thursday. Give me all of the state government regulations, this is the property that we have in Townsville. It's a 1 into 2 subdivision. Give me all the state government rules and regulations And I got this massive summary of all of the things, and like so in the council government regulations, it does not comply, that you're not allowed to do it. However, the state government overlays it. So I'm like, what do I need to say to the town planners when they do the thing? And it gave me incredible results. And the same will be, I mean, I do the research when it comes to the fundamentals for the areas, but you could do the exact same thing now that I think about it. Do the deep research and
normal property question and answer. Here we go. So sorry, there's been some great questions pop in. I really want to I want to unpack those well. Somebody's given us a scenario to talk to, and we're not going to, we're going to have to put a disclaimer up and just say, generally we're speaking this, don't go and do it, this person. But here we go. Normal property Q&A. Why? These are some sort of things.
So let me dive in here, because again, this is the typical investor, and you guys have probably seen it. Joe, you would have seen it when you're talking to people. The first question well, it's not the first question. The first question I ask people when they come and see me is, how do you want to live? And they'll go, what's that got to do with property, Bushy? And I say, everything. Because if you don't know how you're going to live, you don't know how much that lifestyle costs, you don't know what nest egg you need to create, and you don't know then what sort of property and how much property and in what structure and location you need to buy to make that happen. So rather than, again, but because most of the answers I get when I say, well, why property, is make money, save tax, retire, look after my kids. And there's the biggest, dickest thing that creeps in all the time, which is all about the number of properties you own. I couldn't give a rat's bum how many properties you own, quite frankly. I really couldn't, but it's become this, I don't know, competition thing or something. I don't know. I'm more worried about the quality of the asset and the value of the asset than the number you've got. We won't get into the argument of whether you buy one property for 1 million or two at 500,000, because that's a discussion all its own. But for me, time's the most important asset. So the least number of properties with the highest growth, the least amount of time that I need to spend on them is how I want to structure things. Because I do not want a job. I want to free my time up, not use up more of my time in the exercise. So what people don't think about is what their why, what, who, when, and how is, and where's the property going to get you? How's this next property going to get you to where you want to be? And if you don't know where that is, then you're in real trouble, because then you're only as good as the next podcast you listen to or the next person you talk at the pub. You won't stick to the knitting, and you get yourself in strife. So let's now dive into the smart investor. And again, I've touched on this already, but the really smart investors, if we look at sustainable success in anything, that's not just property, it is the combination of self-help and wealth. And let me get specific about what I mean by that, the three L's. You'll get sick of my really bad sense of humor and shocking acronyms that I come up with, but it's easy to stick in your head. The self is your mindset, beliefs, bias, expectations, risk, outlook, and perceptions. It's how you read and see the world. And if you haven't got that headset right, you're doomed before you start. So there's a lot of stuff and the education, again, if you dive into education, listening to shows like yours, reading books, doing the programs, you will develop the mindset, increase your knowledge, and reduce the fear. Then that's enforced through the health piece. And I'm not talking about going to the gym or.
For me, the other thing for me, I guess, when I was starting out was getting myself around people that are in the, like, I think, Jeff, you say it all the time, like normalize, like get yourself around people so that it becomes normal. Wealth is a normal thing. Making money in property is a normal thing, because when I grew up, I had no one to help me from the property side of things or the money side of things. I had no idea. And then as soon as now I'm in rooms with people making hundreds of millions of dollars from property, and it's like, oh gosh, well, like there's opportunity there, and it gives you a much better growth mindset, and you can see someone achieve some pretty incredible results. And yeah, it's interesting to see that happen. Like this is I remember when I was a kid at the skate park all these many years ago, we had there was a core group of people there and everyone was at the same level. And then some kid from over town came over and he did incredible tricks. And all of a sudden, everyone there could then a couple of weeks later, learned how to do those things. So get yourself out of that group and go to those next communities, go to those other places where you can level yourself up. Ricky Steamboat, you'll see him in the comments, has great meetups. We need to have some Oz property meetups. To be honest, we're just flat out busy and we don't have the capacity to do it.
I spoke to Steve about that, mate. We might be doing some soon. But yeah. Anyway, we'll see how we go.
Yeah,
maybe.
Okay. Fine, we'll do one. But anyway, get yourself around people, go to every meetup that you can, and you will start to become far more successful just because of you're around it, and you'll start taking the right action. So it's just more
to that point, Jeff, you're absolutely right. Sadly, the worst people often to talk to about whether you should invest in property are your friends and family, because if they don't invest in property, they're going to talk you out of it. And, I often make the joke that even Jesus' family didn't think he was a Messiah. Because they just didn't believe what he said. It's the same sort of drill. They're the actually worst people to talk to in that regard. You need to be doing exactly what you just said. Swim in the pool with the people who are doing the same thing, and then you can learn off each other and support each other and motivate each other. The second part of that is the health piece, and I'm not talking about going to the gym. I'm talking about your money habits, the patience, persistence, and resilience muscles that you're going to need to last the distance on property. Because I firmly believe it's a long-term game. You might get some short-term wins, but you're likely to be a one-hit wonder. If you're looking for sustainable success, which is where, for me, property has been about funding my lifestyle, so I've got time to spend on things that are important. Then if you can't manage $10, you won't manage 10 million. It's about as simple as that. You really need to get your money habits and that long-term outlook into gear. Because if you don't have those two working for you, you're never going to achieve any sustainable wealth, I can tell you right now. And if you just focus on wealth and you don't get the habits and the mindset right, then you'll shipwreck yourself at some stage. There's nothing surer.
I tend to agree with that. Just briefly, because whatever works for you, as in, like, I'm quite a detailed. I love a good spreadsheet. I love things laid out for me. I love forecasting. For some people, that would not be for them. That would scare them. They'd be like, "Oh no, that's going to look ugly in a couple of months." But to me, I see the number and I'm like, okay, cool. I know what the number looks like. Some people. So if you're just a high headline number, one number, if that works for you, then make sure you figure out what sort of resonates, what floats your boat, because but just make sure you're doing it. But back to this, the strategy is very personal. As I just said.
I'll tell you what I mean by this one. Everyone talks about strategy now. I reckon it's the most overused word in property these days. And sadly, a lot of what I think is pushed as strategy is just sort of thinly disguised marketing tactics to sell property. And they're more tactical than they are strategic. And the other thing that I just want to really reinforce here is that there is no silver bullet. There's no one way to make money on property. Property is agnostic when it comes to that. So what you need to do, if we're using those self-help wealth templates, is craft a strategy that reflects you, your outlook, your capability, and your comfort level, and then make sure it's also in line with your timeline, your physical capability. All of those things need to be weaved into the mix. It's a pretty big. It's like a Rubik's Cube trying to put this together if you do it properly. But if you just follow the next person that you've spoken to, and it doesn't sit with your risk appetite and your sleep at night factor, you won't succeed. If it doesn't match your timeline, you won't succeed. If your affordability, both from a purchase perspective and an ongoing holding cost exercise, isn't right, you won't succeed. So you really need to develop a bit of a dashboard that's going to enable you to craft a personal strategy that's suited directly to you and you alone. And yes, there are some common pieces we need to contemplate, but if someone comes to you and says they have the only magic and secret sauce, run, because it's likely it's not going to work for you. And I guess what goes with that, guys, is that unless you're really clear on your lifestyle strategy, and I'm going to keep coming back to lifestyle strategy because property is the vehicle. That's what we're focused on. What I do see a lot of investors do, if they're not clear on their why and where they're heading, they drown themselves in data, and then they can't see the forest from the trees. And then that becomes a procrastination element, or they'll use the data on the wrong data to make decisions that get them into the wrong sort of property at the wrong time. So there's a bit to think about there.
We're ready to fly. Are we ready? I think
we
are.
Yeah. So again, I'm just going. This is where the raw comes in, guys, because and I'm always looking for an analogy, but I treat success in property as like taking a round the world trip. And if we're going to take an around the world trip over many years, we're going to hit some turbulence. We are going to have issues. It's not a matter of if you're going to have problems with property. It's just a matter of when. But if you've got the right team and the right flight path and the right fuel, and you've got the contingency in place, things aren't a problem. They're just a challenge to overcome. And the key thing that drives that is, are you raw with yourself? So this is where the raw comes in. Are you ready in terms of equity and savings? Are you able in terms of your capacity and financial position? But most importantly, are you willing in terms of your mindset and your outlook? Because if you get those right, then you've got the elements of a dashboard that you're going to start creating that will act like a GPS, because it's not a roadmap. When I hear people talk about the roadmap, the property, well, again, that's not likely to work, because your specific needs and goals will change over time. What you want today won't be what you want in a few years' time. Also, property conditions are going to continue to change. It's, trying to forecast what's going to happen in property is like trying to forecast the weather. And we know how successful weather forecasters are. They're not. So what you need to develop, though, is a GPS that focuses on the key numbers that are going to motivate you as a magnet and guide you as a compass. Because if you're clear on where you're heading and you come off track because your needs, goals, or changes, or the property conditions change, as long as you know the end destination, you can track back towards it by taking some corrective action at the appropriate time. And the key elements of that dial are what I call the Trinity, and I call it a strategy. Here, again, another really bad play on words, guys, so forgive me. But instead of strategy, it's strategy. And it's really integrating the three key components of your lifestyle. So get clear on how you want to live, what you want to do, and what you need to do. And I'm going to break that down into the freedom numbers in a minute. And then have a look, compare that with what you can do, which is the financing piece. And that comes down to what I'm going to call the B.E.A.R facts, which I'll break the B.E.A.R facts down in a minute. And those two will drive what you need and can do in the property side. So property is last. If you haven't got clear on your lifestyle and you haven't got clear on your capability, you're not going to know what you really should be doing in the property sphere. So they're the key bits there. Any comments?
Yeah, they're the fundamentals, right? Like, where do you want to go? How are you practically going to get there? And then what's going to be the vehicle that's going to allow that to happen?
Sounds like the ultimate wealth goal sort of tracker, Joe, which I agree with Bushy. It is going to evolve, because if you've just got this static sort of set of numbers, it is going to change. Like, you'll lose your job, unfortunately. You'll get a pay increase. You'll start a business, and then you can maybe bring that forward a little bit. So it's all about making sure you adjust. It's not necessarily static, but yeah.
Yeah, it's one of these things.
Sorry, Joe, go on.
You go, Bushy. Go.
Just to sort of give you an example of what you guys have touched on there. I had an investor who came to see me. This is quite some years ago, back in Adelaide. And he came into the meeting with 4 investment property books and a spreadsheet that went for about a mile. And I said, talk to me about your plan. He said, well, in 4 years and 3 months' time, I'm going to have a baby. And then I'm going to get the first property and the second property. And that's going to mean this. I'm going to do that. My income's going to be here. And then we're going to do this. He had his whole life mapped out. He's an engineer, used to sort of getting down to that level of detail. And I said, I love your ambition, but I want you to keep that spreadsheet and bring it to me when we catch up in a couple of years' time and see whether it actually lines up. And he's done well, because again, he's focused on it, but it was very different to what he'd spent. Clearly, he'd spent weeks putting that together, his life plan. but his wife had other ideas, and things went in different directions, and his career went in different directions. Still done okay, but it was very different to what he suggested. So that's why I say it needs to be a GPS. So you just need the key dials that are going to allow you to navigate back to where you want to be, or in fact change the end destination if that is the case, because that may happen as well. But at least you've got a means to measure and track how that's going, which means that you can sort of adapt and pivot when and if required. So that's the key there. So
it just doesn't work on a static bit of. It just doesn't work on a static bit of paper. It has to be dynamic. But before we jump in, we've got to jump to our sponsored video. So I want to run through what the Freedom Formula is after this little break.
Everywhere you look, someone else is making money in property except for you. Your mate, he just bought a house. It's already gone up $100,000. There's some bloke on Facebook, he's bragging about pulling in a 7% rental yield. Meanwhile, you're stuck scrolling real estate and domain, confused as hell and having no idea about where to start. Or maybe you're that mate that's got $100,000 in equity. You have a few properties under your belt, but you feel stuck. You're unsure about how to scale without over-leveraging and not knowing what the next right move is. So why does it feel like everyone else has some kind of secret that you're missing out on? It's because they do. There's a reason some people keep stacking properties while others sit on the sidelines stacking excuses. There's a reason why some investors buy under market value while others pay too much. There's a reason why investors know the hot spots before there's any heat. And there's a reason that some people build $150,000 in passive income while others just spend years thinking about it. And it comes down to knowledge. And that's exactly why Jeff Miles and I, Joe Tucker, created the Level Up Property course to hand you the exact step-by-step process that we've used to buy over $100 million worth of property in today's market. We've built Australia's largest property investment community with over 80,000 members, and we help everyday investors secure hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, all without wasting years of their life trying to figure it out the hard way. Making an uneducated decision on the biggest purchase in your life is just gambling with your future.
Stop it. Get some help.
And this isn't just another how to buy property course. Let's be clear though, this course isn't free. What? And neither should it be. This is our life's work. We've spent over 100 hours each on this course alone. Oh, babe. Okay, video number 3. Number 4 with million does... Fuck. Done. We've got decades of experience, millions of dollars in deals distilled into a repeatable process that you can take away for yourself. If you're looking for free advice, there's plenty of noise out there. You can go and find that if you'd like. But if you want real, actionable, step-by-step guided process that works in today's market, then this investment is going to change everything for you. By the time that you finish this course, you will have full confidence. You'll have every tool that you need to build an amazing portfolio if you act on it, right? Which is why we have mentoring built in. So we kick you up the butt to make sure that you're kicking your goals. So the real question is, how much longer are you going to watch everyone else making money in property before you jump in and start playing the property game properly? Because the sooner you start, the sooner you start winning.
We're back. Funny story. I did do
gold.
Yeah.
That's the best thing I've seen for I don't know how long. It was absolute gold, guys.
Wait till you see Steve's.
My favorite part of watching this video was that last 3 minutes or so. Sorry if anyone had to suffer through that, because you didn't see what I see. It was just Bushy cracking up, because we can see the guests and everything, and all I can see is just Bushy cracking up laughing at each and every point. It was hilarious.
Oh, that was gold. That was really good, guys. I love almost the Monty Python style Joe Tucker with the moving lips.
We got a good one for Steve as well. That
was awesome. That was awesome. You got to send me a copy of that. I'll give it to me. I'm going to push that out everywhere because that's just absolute gold.
It was fun. David asked the question, was it fun to make? It was fun to be in as well. I was Bluesfield back in the day. Anyway. So what have we got here? It looks like we've got some some numbers and some
again, I'm not
periodic
going to
table.
tie it up. All I'm going to say is that the on the right of the screen there, you'll see the 6-step process. I'm going to try and dance you through the first 3, because the first 3 are the bits that most investors either don't do it all or only superficially do it, and that's not their issue. It's just they don't have access to the tools or the process. So that's what we're going to concentrate on, and it is the 6 steps. There is so we are sort of releasing a property wealth program. It's not going to be anywhere near as funny as the level up exercise. I'm not really sure of that. But for those that just want to understand the ins and outs of the exercise, it'll be useful and complementary. So let's dive in now. So I want to jump into sort of breaking this down, going back to our test case dummies that we spoke about at the start, Jess and Michael, and jump into the lifestyle numbers. So let's jump into that, because it, as I've said already, it's not about property or money, it's about time. And if we sort of jump it through, the why is the starting point. And the key question that I always ask people, and I continue to ask guys before I do anything, is what does your ideal lifestyle look like? But also what goes hand in hand with that is how much is enough for you to live the way you want?
Yep.
And there's so many people, I don't know about you guys, but they say, well, I don't want to put limits on it, Bushy. And I said, well, you don't need to put limits on it, but you need to put a number on it, because I saw my old man kill himself chasing money. He literally worked himself in an early grave because he wanted to be a millionaire, and he sacrificed everything else in that pursuit. And I guess learning from him directly, I vowed and declared I would never put myself in the same boat. So get clear on how much is enough. If it ends up being more, bonus, but sit down with your partner if you have one. Take the time and really work out and have some fun with it. Sonia and I did this way back in good old 1998. It's the first time we did this, and we've done it every year since, because that's part of our GPS system ourselves to see what's changed. But work out, just flesh out your year. How much time you want to have off? What do you want to do? Are there big rocks that you want to achieve this year? And then throw some numbers at it. It's pretty easy to build up a number, because once you're clear on what your perfect day, week, and year looks like, and what you're doing with who, where, and why, it's very easy to monetize that. And once you monetize it, it's then very easy to work out where you need to go from here. So again, what you're seeing on the screen now is the vision board. That I'm a very visual person. So and I actually put this together back in 1998. Wow. So I'm one of those tosser wankers who has to have this thing around the house. So I've still got on the back of the toilet door. And
have you sung with Sting in Perfect Harmony?
No, that's it, mate. You've got to help me out. You really need to help me out there, Jeff. If I might be dribbling out of my mouth in a wheelchair in a nursing home somewhere by the time it happens, but I'm determined to be singing with Sting at some time live. I've seen him live. I saw him in Verona in Italy years ago, the home of Romeo and Juliet, and it was absolutely gobsmacking.
If anybody has any connections to Sting, please let us know.
Please.
I'm all for making.
Please get me there. Yes, that'd be a dying wish. Have some fun with it. I've got a vision board. Sonia wrote a letter to her mum in years time about what she's doing, and there's a whole bunch of some people write poems. Just have some fun with it, and then listen to it. I recorded a thing on my phone, and I'll listen to it regularly. Just sort of gets me excited and motivated. Because it's, I'm not going to get woo-woo about the law of attraction, but certainly what you think about is what you bring about. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And if that keeps you motivated and excited, it'll help you crawl across the broken glass and the speed humps that you're inevitably going to encounter in property, because you will. But if the why is big enough, then you'll make that happen. So have some fun with it. And work out how much your lifestyle costs. So what's on the screen here, and I'm going to dance across this. But, the modest retirement on 80 grand a year, you can see what it gives you there. I reckon a couple, once you've paid off your home loan in today's dollars, need a minimum of about 120 grand. And that'll give you an overseas holiday once a year, and you can eat out regularly, decent car, have some bottled wine, good clothes, blah, blah, blah. Whatever that number is, get clear on it, because, and if you can't work it out, if you look at your current incomes and then use about 80% of that, assuming you've paid off the home loan by the time you don't have to work anymore, that's going to pretty much maintain a similar lifestyle to what you're currently enjoying. But put some numbers around it, get clear about it, because we're now going to apply that approach to our good friends Jess and Michael that we spoke about before. And in sitting down with them, they said, look, we want to be in a position where we don't have to work in about 15 years' time. 150 grand a year will be enough. Strangely, it's 150 grand a year. I'm not sure where that came from, Jeff. And
well, it used to be everybody wanted that number of 100K, and now I suppose with a little bit of inflation and all that sort of jazz, and it's I suppose increased to 150. So you added 50% on top of it.
Yeah, it's a pretty good number. So I sort of lined it up with what you guys are doing. And then the other important question is to make sure that an investor knows how much they can comfortably invest on a weekly basis. So in this case, based on what their discretionary spend is at the end of the week, they could put $400 a week towards a property if they had to, and it could probably stretch it to $500 if they really wanted to go the extra mile. So they're all pretty key parameters that you need to think about. And now I want to jump into what I call the freedom forecaster, and I want to do two looks at that. Firstly, what I always say to people is if you do nothing differently to what you're doing, where you're going to end up, because if what you're currently doing is going to get you there, you don't need to do anything. But if there's a gap between that and where you need to be, what is that gap and how we're going to help you bridge it? So they're the key things we're going to have a look at. And that sort of translates into what I like to call the freedom numbers. So your lifestyle income is the 150 grand we spoke about. That means that we need to create an income producing nest egg of $3 million over that 15 years, because at a 5% return on whether it's property, shares, cash, dividends, you name it, crypto, 5% return is roughly achievable. It will vary year to year, but as a rule of thumb. So 3 million is the nest egg target. We've got 15 years as the timeline. Now we're going to look at where will you end up if you do nothing? What's the gap? And that will pretty much drive you in terms of whether you're going for growth or cash flow. And what does that mean in actual asset numbers and potential property numbers if you're thinking about it that way? Because the really simple exercise is if your current assets, excluding the family home, because that's not an asset unless you sell it and you've still got to live somewhere. If your current assets, which are super shares, cash, etc., and property, is going to get you to what that nest egg number is, or exceed it, then cash flow needs to be the focus. If it's below it, then growth needs to be the key driver. So and that helps in determine the type of property that you need to look at. So if you're, and again, these are rough rules of thumb, they're not set in stone. But if you're focusing on growth, the highest performing growth properties in the country are 3 or 4 bedroom homes on a block of dirt in a suburb that everyone wants to live in. Simple as that. If you're going for cash flow and you're looking for higher yield, then it's units, apartments, commercial property. It might be ETFs, Vanguard indices, other things that are low time but high yield. So that's very much sets the framework for where we're aiming. And before I display it, I've got to do the ask cover here, guys. The old disclaimer that says this isn't financial advice. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a financial planner. I'm sharing general information. You need to have it verified.
We have our own little fun police cop as well. Bushy, on your just going back, and there's a couple of really gun questions that I think would be good. So you mentioned there, where do you sit on the property versus shares? Because I promised Gurav that I'd ask that.
Both.
This is financial advice, but both. Okay, there you go.
Both. So it's not an or discussion. It's an and discussion. So two things to keep in mind here, guys. If you've got super, and it's not a self-managed super scheme, it's in shares. So you've already got a fair exposure to the equities market through shares. So, I am one for diversifying. I started in shares. So I mentioned earlier I was on the bones of my bum in my mid-30s after I went through a sad divorce. I was actually day traded for a couple of years to try and build up some funds to get out, and it was a scary ride. I was trading CFDs in those days.
That is
Contracts for difference, and they're heavily leveraged. So I was buying indices at 100 to 1 leverage in the share market. And there was days when I would lose 30 grand overnight, guys, and I could do nothing about it. It was a very scary ride, but I managed to go from zero to enough to get a deposit on my first property. And then I went hard on property because of the leverage value of the property. I could just buy a much higher value asset using much less of my money. And then even at lower growth, it still helped me create a much bigger nest egg. But at the other end, I've gone back into shares. So
for the cash flow perspective, right? Like if you get that $3 million nest egg and you're getting a 6% return, that's what you want, right? That stacks up.
Hands down from a leverage perspective, if you're going for growth, and I've done the numbers, property, because the banks are going to take up between 80 to 90% of it, your ability to leverage up in terms of the asset value, and then let the tenant, the tax office do the heavy lifting, you're going to be way better off. It's 3.5 times what you could achieve if you just leveraging shares, and you can still get a margin loan on shares, but it's very volatile and high risk.
Yeah, mum and dad investors are not tend to, putting a 20% deposit and getting $1 million loan on shares to leverage it. It just isn't reality. But they'll do it every single day on property.
Yeah. Well, what I often say, guys, banks who are very good at making money, and year on year, their shareholder returns are massive. The fact that they will let you borrow 80 to up to 95% of a value of a property if you're an owner-occupier tells you that they think it's a very safe asset to stick their money in. So if the banks who have got much bigger resources and a lot smarter than I am, think they're happy sticking up to 95% of the value into residential property, that's telling me that that's a very low-risk asset because they're very good at making sure they don't lose money to banks.
Very diplomatic, Bushy. So back to, sorry, man, getting nitty-gritty disclaimers.
No, that's good. So let's rip into this. So let's have a look at Michael and Jess. So taking their current assets, so they got 235 grand in super, 10 grand's worth of shares, 90 grand's worth of cash, based on the average growth rates for all of those asset classes and taking into account inflation. Because I'm using 2.65% as the average long-term inflation, which apart from the last couple of years, that's what it has been, and it's below that now actually, based on current figures. Then in 15 years' time, if they do nothing differently, remembering that in 15 years' time they're not 60, so they won't be able to access their super at all. That means that their net asset base then will be about 113 grand. Which means that if you converted that at 5%, you'd have to survive on $5,600 a year.
Oof, that ain't doing it, son.
Nah, and that's the story for a lot of people who think super is the answer, sadly. And you would have heard this stat before, but according to the ABS, over 73% of retirees over the age of 65 are surviving on a total of $15,300 a year to live on, and that equates to $295 a week. So, and that is what a lot of people who think just paying off the home loan and putting money into super is going to do for them.
Yeah, you need to be giving your nan $20 at Christmas rather than the other way around.
Spot on. That's exactly right. Sadly, now jumping forward though, if we extend that out to when they can retire, so Jess will hit retirement in 19 years' time, when they can access their super, again, using the average long-term growth rates and taking off inflation, they're going to have about $1 million in nest egg at the end of that period. And if we preserve the nest egg, so we're not spending the nest egg, we're living off what the nest egg feeds you through rent, interest, etc., then about 54 grand is what they'll survive on, which is in pretty good. But if we come back to that 15-year horizon to get them in that shape, then in 15 years' time, they're 2.9 mil short of what they need. But if we take inflation off that number and bring it back to what does that mean right here, right now, today, they're 1.3 mil short, which is 2 to 3 properties. So if they go out and secure growth properties with a value of 1.3, and they buy it in the areas with the 3 eyes and all the rest of it we've touched on, that will get them to their 150 grand a year. And now the thing I need to say here, there is some assumptions here, because what I don't know and no one can predict is how you're going to rationalize that portfolio in 15 years' time, because what this is not is buying property, paying off the debt and living off the rent, because the rent's not going to give you 150 grand a year, I can tell you right now. But what the property will do is it'll grow the asset value, which you can then rationalize through a good accountant, and progressively over a number of financial years convert that into a much more high yielding tax effective income through other assets, which can be units, townhouses, commercial property, ETFs, index funds, etc., all of the above. So that's pretty much the magic about getting to the 150. So that's the summary of those freedom numbers. And the key thing to take away from that, and the number that needs to stick in people's head, is the 1.32 mil, because that's what they would need to secure today. And because they are short, they need to go for growth. So growth is the key focus that they need to look at their property. So again, these are averages and rules of thumb, but the best performing growth assets are 3 or 4 bedroom homes on a block of dirt in a very tightly held suburb that everyone wants to live in. That's about as simple as the maths needs to get. And remember, we're keeping in mind that this is a simple strategy for a couple that are very risk averse. So for them, a wealth by stealth focus is really key, which is really about buying or building and then renting and holding by using as little of your money to secure as big an asset base as possible, as quickly as possible, and then make it as affordable as possible through structuring and ownership structures, and then just simply letting the tenant, the tax office do the heavy lifting while capital growth does its work. So that's the maths on that. What we now need to do, though, is, so we know what you want to do and need to do, let's have a look at what you can do. So we're going to apply the B.E.A.R facts to these guys, which is the examination phase of the property wealth clock. And that really comes back to what I've heard you say it before, Jeff, and from your mortgage broking background, I've learned that property really is a game of finance, and it'll make or break what you can do in terms of how you structure that. But if we apply the B.E.A.R facts approach to really breaking that down, if we look at the grizzly bear, the B is for borrowings, the E is for equity, the A is for affordability, and affordability is how much per week is that property going to cost you, and when every cost involved in buying and holding a property is weaved in, and then look at that on year 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, beyond. The lowest of borrowings and equity will determine what your actual purchase price power is. And then we need to make sure that we've weaved in the risk elements to make sure that you're protecting yourself and not overextending yourself. So if we weave that in, I'm not going to dance across this because there's a whole bunch of finance criteria that makes a big difference to the key things that I think investors need to focus on. And time and time again, I hear banks and brokers carry on about the interest rate, the low rate loans. Your biggest assets as an investor are your capacity, your cost, and your risk. So if you can optimize your capacity by using banks that give you a much higher capacity than someone else, and you would know this, Jeff, there's a 55% variation across the lenders in terms of what they'll let you borrow in exactly the same financial position. Also, be very careful about which banks and which valuers you engage, because if you're relying on equity from one property to help fund another, knowing the valuation attitude of a bank has a big influence on your ability to get your hands on that equity. But also looking at loans in terms of their cost, not their rate. So looking at ingoing, ongoing, outgoing, offset impacts, to look at what the true cost of that loan is really important in terms of giving yourself the best chance. And then avoiding the typical structure that I see a lot of banks and brokers still do, which just amazes me, where they'll bolt on an investment property or two. They don't tell the investor that they've cross-securitized all their loans back against the home, so it's putting that at risk. At the moment, everything's P&I because it's a lower rate, and that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because you want to be, what you're actually doing if you've got a P&I loan on an investment property is you're reducing your tax deductibility at the time when you've got the income. So you want to be keeping your home P&I and keeping your investment properties interest only. So any surplus is going into getting rid of that non-deductible home loan, not paying down an investment property yet. We can do that later once you've paid off the home. Yes, you'll pay a slightly higher rate for an interest-only loan, but the difference between the P&I and interest-only loan is about 35% in repayments. So even if it's a slightly higher rate, you're going to have a lot extra surplus that can go into your offset account to pound down that home loan. The worst possible thing you can do. What I suggest you do is have every property and every loan standalone, separate from each other, and quite often use different lenders across the bank, because the more loans you have with one lender, the bigger risk that bank sees you, and they start to buffer what extra they'll allow you to borrow, if anything.
Plus, it just exposes the borrower to risk as well. If they even if they are sort of standalone, separate kind of things, you just need to be careful to read those loan contracts, the all monies clause. I don't know if you, but that can be kind of a bit trip people up potentially.
Well, very good point, because I saw it. We had someone who reached out to us. It was 2 or 3 years ago now, Jeff, who had a property in Perth and a property in a mining town, which is not a great idea, but they had an investment property there. They went to sell their house in Perth, and they went. It wasn't cross-securitized, but it was with the one bank. It was with one of the major banks. I won't mention who it is. But that major bank, because the loan on the mining town property was higher than the value of the property, they wouldn't let them sell the house.
Yeah,
they had to cancel a contract because it increased the bank's exposure, so they didn't allow them to do what they.
Whereas if it's with
even though
it's interesting.
So that multiple lender structure is really important because you just want to put as much flexibility and control back in your hands as the others. But again, I don't want to dwell on that. We can have that would be a session in itself. But let's have a look at the capacity side now for Jess and Michael. Based on that profile I mentioned to you, as the typical investor, they went along to Westpac, and Westpac would only let them borrow an extra 33 grand. ANZ, which is who they did the loan with, would let them borrow an extra 559. So they bought that property with ANZ at the time. The smart, now that they're smart investors and they've done the Jekyll and Hyde brain removal routine, they now had a look at what they can do by talking to an investment savvy broker. And across the 40 lenders, there's a bank that will actually allow them to borrow just shy of 1.3 mil, which means if we take off stamp duty, reno costs, all of the on costs, plus a 10% allowance for a rainy day reserve, then the maximum purchase price that they could get their teeth into would be about just over $1 million based on current lending fraternity. Remembering that they need to secure 1.32, so they're about 270 odd grand short of where they need, but still a pretty good position. So that means that their maximum borrowings is 1.29. If we look at their equity, so this is the under that raw exercise, this is the ready equity position. Based on their home value and the current home loan, there's about between 345 and 465 grand in available equity. That's not touching the 90 grand offset savings that they've got sitting there.
So they're not even using any cash whatsoever. So, I've got, like, how much was it? $90,000. I've been saving my ass off, ready to buy a property. Well, you don't need to. You've got equity in your principal place of residence that you can now use and keep that $90,000. Awesome.
Spot on. And again, if an investor doesn't have a rainy day reserve, either through offset savings or available equity, I say don't do it. Because the sleep at night factor that creates and the financial stress that imposes, that often leads you to make short-term reactive decisions when you're under pressure, versus having the peace of mind and the breathing space of knowing that when something happens, then you've got either low-cost money to get your hands on or savings you can get into, so you're not relying directly on salary or what you're living on day to day. It adds to that sustainability. So that safety rainy day reserve is really key I think, for anyone who's serious about lasting the distance. But what that means is, from an equity perspective, again, and this is just coincidence that these numbers worked out, because normally there's a difference between what you can do equity-wise and what you can do borrowing capacity-wise. But given their equity position, just over $1 million property is what the equity would allow them to do. So that means that if we combine those two, just 1.05 is where they're at. That's 270 short of the 1.3 that they need to achieve their 15-year goal to convert into 150 grand income. So they're in pretty good shape, these guys. Put themselves in a good position. What we now want to check on, though, is, well, if they went out and did buy property worth 1.05, and that could be one property or it could be two or three, depending on how they want to cut up the onion. We need to think about the affordability piece, though, because this is another thing that trips everyone else up. I think there's so many investors I've seen that bail out early because they just haven't realised how much a property's going to cost them, and they haven't structured it the right way. There's some tweaks here that I'll show you a quick example of in a minute, but quick example, if you went out and bought a 650 grand home on a combined income of 270, then the holding cost, when every cost in both buying and holding a property is concerned, or building one, then the old place is going to be just under $500 a week. A well-structured property is going to drop back to closer to $200 a week. And if you new build, and I'm not saying there's not risk with new build, but if everything else was equal, I would build every day of the week. Easy for me because I used to be an architect, but so I'm comfortable with it. But in terms of the numbers, there's some real benefits if you're doing it well. And again, I won't distract myself, but that's probably a discussion for another day. What we then need to do is have a look at what that means. So that one of the things, again, that people can help themselves with is to restructure their existing lending. And it's not difficult to squeeze an extra $400 to $1,200 a month just by sticking your existing home loan with someone else and structuring it the right way. And that's equivalent to giving yourself up to a 20 grand pay rise if you pay tax on it. And just by doing that, you can effectively, over the term of the loan, carve off over 100 grand worth of interest savings and pay it off a lot sooner, just through that process. But more importantly, if we then say these guys went out and bought property worth 1.05 mil, and I've based this on a 4% gross yield, and I've been very belts and braces with the numbers here. So I've assumed a 7% annual vacancy rate on the property, which, if you've got the right tenant, the right property manager, that won't be the case. But I want to be really worst case conservative on this. But depending on how you buy the property, so if you go and buy the property as joint tenants, so 50-50, that value worth of property under current rates is going to cost you about $538 a week in year 1, down to $370 in year 10.
So, Bushy, I'm mindful we're almost at the hour and a half mark, mate. I just don't want to. I want to be respectful of your time. So let's.
No. Well, this bit's important. I'll just labour on this one very quickly because this affordability piece is the bit that trips a lot of investors up. So whatever you do, talk to someone who can really get down into the weeds with the nitty-gritties of the costs and the tax treatments to work out what the true cost of a property is. Because this example here, if they go out and buy the full tote odds at 1.05, then under joint tenants, it's between 530 and 370 a week. If they buy it in a trust, because all of the it's not, you can't apply any of the tax credits against your income, that cost per week jumps up to $845 to $700 a week over the first 10 years. So I just want to mention that because there's a lot of accountants who push the trust process really strongly. And yes, for asset protection and everything else, bonus. But if you're starting out and the affordability of holding that property is important to you, particularly early on when you don't have a lot of extra cash to splash around, think very hard about how you structure the ownership of the property and how you structure the financing. Because if you just shift from joint tenants to tenants in common, where Jess had 90% of the property and Michael only had 10%, that drops down to just over $400 to $268 a week over the 10 years. And if you're brave enough to build property worth that cost you 1.05. Because of the stamp duty savings and the full tax depreciation benefits, that drops down to $290 to $159 a week. So that affordability exercise, I think this is the area that very few people spend a lot of time analysing, and we do, because I'm just one of those anal nuts who just want to know the ins and outs of things, and we've got access to some very sophisticated software that allows us to do that. But this is the first thing we will do with an investor. We'll paint all of this, all of the BFX and all of the free numbers out before we even start to think about property, so that they've got their head around what the true impacts are before they go any further. So that really nails that side. I won't go into the risk protection stuff that you need to wrap around this, because we're out of time. But I guess the key thing that I wanted just to take away is, if you are able to get down to your BFX and your freedom numbers, then you do have a dashboard that can start to drive the process. Yes, you do need, if we were doing some work with you, we put you through our willing test, which we dive deep on a whole bunch of questions to get a really good sense of where your head's at and what your outlook and expectations are, to make sure that it is sustainable. And again, there's a whole bunch of stuff on the screen there, which is part of the dashboard that you really need to take on board. And if I use an analogy, if you've seen a sound engineer mix stuff for a band or a record, the number of dials and levers that they need to pull to produce the quality sound are very similar to how much information you need to weave into to really think about what the right strategy is for you. So you take that on board. For these guys, given what we've spoken about, growth focus, so a standalone home in a tightly held location is what they need to look at. They're in the mid-range of cash flow affordability. So again, I wouldn't be getting them into a home that's any more than 20 years old, because we're going to need the depreciation to work for us. Their time horizon is 15 years. So that will go through a complete S-curve. The average growth, again, there's this myth that keeps getting perpetrated that property doubles in value every 10 years. It is a myth. If you actually do the research, and I've sat down and done it and compared it with Simon Presley, he's about as anal as I am when it comes to the researching the numbers. The average time it takes to go through a full growth cycle is 15 years. And it's not a beautiful exponential curve. It's an S curve. It spikes 2 to 3 years, like we've just seen from COVID. It flattens out for 5 to 10%, goes horizontal for up to 8 years, and then goes through its next growth spike if the three eyes are in play. So their time horizon is good, because they'll go through, after you go through a worst case exercise there. They're risk averse, so they need a low touch property, and they've got low knowledge, so they're going to need to have a proven team around them in each of the key positions to make sure that they don't get themselves into hot water. So they're the key bits. That pretty much, I was going to jump through a whole heap of other stuff, but
there's a whole heap there. I think we need to get you back on, mate. I don't want to do this any injustice. There's so much here to unpack. I like that you break. You name it and you kind of number it so that we know exactly where we are and what we're doing in each situation, so that you just can go down a path of like, okay, great. Well, what do we need to have in place to be able to achieve this? It's amazing. What we want to do is just run to this next post, and then we will wrap up. There's some great questions that have popped in, so if you're open and willing, Bushy, it would be great to jump into some of these questions that folks have had on a whole heap of this stuff.
Oh, Jeff, I wish there was 3 investing books that covered everything property.
Oh, Joe, there is. Steve has 3 books now.
That I do, guys. I've got 3 books now. You probably don't even have to follow this group anymore. Just kidding. You want to keep seeing and hearing from me, of course, so stay involved. But in all seriousness, if you want to get the full picture of investing, residential, commercial, and development, these 3 books have you covered for the fundamentals. For OzProp members, here's the best part. I'm giving these books to you for free. Just cover the postage and I'll send them right to your door. Go to policyproperty.com or click the link below and get your copies today. You can also get all my spreadsheets, checklists, and resources free on my website. Happy reading, gang.
He's back. He does it quicker than us as well. He's about a third of the pace, or no, where a third of the pace is easy.
Did you guys produce that as well? Because that's
No,
that was Steve's team actually. Yeah,
did he? Okay, he's copied your style then.
Yeah. No, I think it's I think we copied each other. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah,
There's not much original these days, but no, commercial property can be good, of course. This is of course, this is not financial advice we're about to discuss here.
We covered that.
But this is more specific. So, here
And,
we go.
And Steve's a legend. Steve is a legend, by the way.
Yeah, he definitely is. I love it to see. So Tiago has said because that's why I wanted this. So incomes of roughly, let's say, around 300K, mortgage $1 million, which is PPOR. So they've got some equity there. A couple of kids, private school, 180K super combined. I mean, super's great. Shares, no other debt. And then he's sort of saying, any thoughts on like how you can actually, what his question was, is what he should sort of, how you would approach that, because you've got a lot of debt and not knowing expenses, of course. But I suppose this is kind of where it gets back to Jess and pros and cons in the current. I mean, that's an option. You can look at the flip or the buy and hold kind of scenario. And it kind of comes down to what you actually want to achieve. What's most important to you? Because if you go and rent, you're freeing up that borrowing capacity, plus you're buying back some of the debt, plus you're releasing some of that equity, I suppose, PPR. So you're probably not paying any tax on it, assuming it's been a PPR the whole time. So, but aside from that, I suppose there is the AMP potential option, which is, I mean, assuming it fits, it might not fit with AMP, but there's extending the loan term out from wherever they are now. So how would you kind of think about that, Bushy? Because
can you bring it up again, just so that I can see the numbers there? Because the big challenge there, but we apply that sort of B.E.A.R framework to it, is equity. It's the equity challenge. If the property's worth 1.3 and it's got $1 million mortgage on it, there's bugger all.
You're already at 80% roughly thereabouts.
Yeah,
you might be able to.
So that's the big challenge, I think. Again, if you use the right lender who does a desktop and doesn't do a physical. There are lenders where you can use a underestimate. Yes, that can achieve that. So if you've got a savvy broker that you're dealing with, they'll be across that.
Have to be really buttoned up though, as in from I suppose your expense situation, because you've got a couple of kids there and you've got that already, the $1 million debt. So let's assume that's a 6%. You're paying at least 60K per annum. Assume it's not interest only, so you're probably paying between 80 and 90,000 roughly on the repayments for that. So you just have to be mindful. You don't want to overextend yourself too much. So there's a couple of levers you could pull there, Tiago, but it's really coming down to what
you could rent vest, but then the danger is you've got to be careful with that as well, because you're just exchanging non-deductible debt for rent, and the rent is that's a full-blown expense when it comes to borrowing capacity. So that will limit the exercise as well. But I'd be looking to play around with getting crafty around the lender and the valuation to see if you can creep a little bit of equity on that front. But also, without knowing which bank you're with, anything you can pull out of that in terms of reducing the cost of the loan by using a sharper lender would definitely assist the buying capacity, because there is a massive variation across the lenders in terms of how much. You would know this yourself, Jeff, with your own experience. You just need to be dealing with someone who really got the finger on the pulse with that.
It's such a great point as well, because with $1 million loan, you could, based on the goal that you have, like there would be a situation where you could go with the cheapest option, and that's the best option for you. But then on the other hand, you could go with the option that's going to give you the best borrowing ability. It's going to give you the best equity, which is going to allow you to go for the next property. But it's kind of like what Bushy's been talking about at the beginning. Throughout this is, what is the goal? Where do you want to end up? Because if it's aggressively buying property, then that valuation is going to be important. But with $1 million worth of debt, 1 percentage point discount is $10,000
in
straight off in interest. Sorry, one discount at 1% interest. That's $10,000. You know, like 2%, $20,000, right? Like that's massive.
There are other lenders that he can look at. I don't want to mention them on the exercise
because they can change, and you don't necessarily want to
always change. It's like insurance, right? Like insurance are always changing with
maybe one of the big four can be pretty good at the moment, one of them, but I think but maybe that's
my best advice would be talk to a really savvy mortgage broker.
And
every industry, there's good, bad, and ugly in every industry. You just need to find someone who is
current interest rate 6.04.
That's not too bad. I mean, I reckon
pretty good rate.
Pretty sharp.
It's not too bad.
Good rate, given where it's at. Again, next Tuesday there'll be a slice of that. We just don't know how much. I would say.
I managed to somehow get 5.6, but that's a sub 80 LVR. Yeah, but that's not investment. That's PPR. And that's also sub 80 LVR. So when you start getting very competitive, then what I was going to say is what I was going to say is though as well. This is where having that kind of conversation up front with your partner and kind of getting some idea, because if you'd have bought that, I don't know what the plans were in 2022, but if you said, you could kind of say, hey, look, if I buy this investment property now, I'm probably not going to, if I buy this PPR, I'm not going to be able to buy that next property. And then you've got a trade-off. So I don't know what the situation was like back then, but maybe that was the absolute priority to go to the private school in that area. But anyway,
it's a good point, Jess. It's a very good point.
It's a trade-off. It's not easy. I know.
I don't know. I mean, he's made $300,000 in 3 years, like $100,000 a year. You've crushed it well. But having a little bit of time.
You've made a really good point, though, Jeff, because, and again, very different situation for Sonia and I when we got together, but because we were both on the bones of our ass, but we were determined because of what had happened before to make a massive change. So and then I'm talking in the late 90s, we rent vested then. It wasn't even called rent vesting. An accountant just said, here's the numbers. I think you'd be better off renting and using capacity to buy a property that you use in investment. And it was like a light bulb moment at that stage of the game. And we rent invested for a long time before, because their idea was to build the nest egg and then pay for the forever home with cash at the end of the journey. And that's worked out really well for us. But we were the sort of couple that were quite happy to do that. We're gypsies at heart, and we didn't want to be stuck in, because we knew the place we'd live in now wouldn't be the place we'd want to live in 5 or 10 years' time anyway, because the needs change. So that worked really well for us. But this is where I keep saying the internal side is as important as the external side to get that right. And the really important thing that you just mentioned there, Jeff, is making sure that both of you are on the same page. Because how many investors are you guys seeing where one party is gung-ho into it up to the eyeballs, knows the ins and outs of it, the other one's sort of got this vague interest, and then when it comes to the crunch and they go buy a property, the other party says, wait a minute, what the hell, what do you mean you're going to put me into this debt and it all crumbles? So one really key take-home message is to make sure your partner is on the same page as you and you have those discussions, because if you're not, it's going to create issues for you.
And it's just an ongoing, evolving conversation as well. And I've gotten better at it as well, because when I first started, I was like, no, this is the way it's going to happen. Whereas that didn't quite fly as well as it might have. So it's about bringing the person, whoever that is, whoever's the main party, along for the journey. But yeah, I reckon we'll make this the last one, because there's heaps of questions. If your strategy is to accumulate 3 to 5 properties to hold long term, and you buy in a hotspot early on, good on you, I suppose, and then maybe not good on you, depending on what the strategy is. Is it worth selling when the market is high and selling horses for courses, or do you stick to the set and forget approach? Joe, we'll throw to you first, mate, and then Bushy. Yeah, what do you reckon?
Well, I mean, you can keep jumping in and out of markets, but it's expensive to do so. But also, if a market's had its day and you're like, oh, actually, I think I can allocate this capital elsewhere, then go ahead and do it. But just know what the actual facts of the matter is. Like, I had a situation, like just today. Was it today? Yeah, it was this morning. I ran the numbers on it. Yeah, no, yeah, it was. Oh gosh, let me just find that. Yeah, we bought it for 472,000 in June 2022. It's grown. He just sold it for 700,000, so that's $228,000 additional on top of that.
Adelaide,
right?
Wasn't it?
South Australia, 472,000 just under 3 years ago, and he sold it for 700,000. He's made $228,000. That's absolutely incredible. So when you actually do the calculations for the stamp duties, the legals, the buy-ins, the sell-ins, and everything like that, it actually works out to be netting profit, net gains after all costs. So 228,000. After capital gains tax, stamp duties, paying everything is $103,000. So, yeah, it's just the numbers. Like, so when you are cutting out of that, just make sure that that $100,000 is worth it. Because, I mean, for a $228,000, he can take out, I mean, you guys are the brokers, he can take out 80% of that. He can take out almost $180,000 of cash to go into his next one. From equity, usable equity, to then go and buy another property, or he can take $100,000 of cash and do the exact same thing. So why do it? The reason why you would do it is that you don't believe that there's any steam. Now, this client sold this property 2 months ago. On RP data, it's gone up to $730,000. So it's a long-term hold location. It was a situation where he's changed. So for me, buy in an area because it's a long-term value for the next 10 years, not the next 3 years. So
that sounds like a lot of tax, though, man. But anyway, that's probably a different. Maybe it's after the
capital gains for the capital gains because he's made good money. It's I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't mind paying tax. I'm making plenty of money.
Must be in the highest tax bracket already.
Yeah.
The thoughts I would have on that. That would drive that decision. What is my investment horizon? So how long is the time frame? Keeping in mind the worst case sort of 15-year cycle, but more importantly, what do the three I's look like in that particular location? So if there isn't any new infrastructure, there's no new industry, there's no gentrification like to occur. If an area is actually built right out, but it's a great place to be, and people are starting to gentrify the area and redevelop, and the income demographics in that location aren't strong and growing, then I'd do a cost-benefit analysis and do exactly what you said, Jeff. I'd look at, okay, well, here's the selling cost. So we've got the straight selling costs, we've got the loan discharge costs, we've got the capital gains tax. On the flip side, we've got 6 or 7% that it's going to cost us to get into another property. So if you look at that changeover, the property that you go into is got to demonstrate a substantial upside to cover the changeover costs. So it's not I guess my feeling is there's never one answer. It's about how does that fit into what that particular investor is trying to achieve, and then run the numbers against that. So what's your timeline? What's the affordability of the property? If the property's burning a hole in their pocket, it might be growing all right, but if it's costing a lot because it hasn't been structured very well, that's got its own implications that you need to consider also. So there might be some moderating of the property, reflecting the timeline, and then if it looks like the area is dead, if there's nothing likely to happen in the next 15 years in that location, and you think it has peaked and it's likely to go sideways for a considerable period of time, then run the numbers and see whether there's a real benefit in changing it over and putting into something else. Yeah,
totally agree. Like for me, it's, do you need to sell the properties? If the answer's yes, to get you out of one area, to get you into if the answer is yes, I need to sell it, then great. Just run that cost benefit analysis of what it's actually working. But do remember to factor in the capital gains tax and things like that. But if you don't need to sell, like I'm chatting to investors that are like, oh, should I sell or should I? It's like, do you need? Because what you need is three things. You need cash and equity, borrowing ability and serviceability, in your cash flow situation. If all of those are fine, then hold it. Like this guy sold at 700,000, it's now worth 730. That's $30,000 he could have had. He didn't need. I mean, this situation is different. Let's say you sold it and you didn't need to sell it. Then you'd be up 30 grand because you held it. So yeah, it's a balance. There's no straight answer. What about you, Jeff? Is there any difference or any things that you would add to that?
No. I mean, I tend to agree. It comes down to then what the serviceability is as well, because maybe I mean, if there's not serviceability, or if you're forced to sell, then maybe that takes a little bit out of the equation. But yeah, you could have, I suppose, if it was a finishing up a relationship potentially, then you just have to see if you could borrow. But yeah, that's the only other thing I would add to that. Similar thoughts. It's kind of horses for courses what the location looks like. But before we go and wrap up, I want to say, people, this has been an amazing session. If you've wanted to understand, if you've gotten value from the strategy, drop us a 5-star. I think we're at nearly 40 on Spotify now. They're rolling in. We've almost doubled our Spotify ratings in the last 2 or 3 months. So because that helps, maybe Louis Christopher will come on. But if we get to 100 5-stars, or we'll get Sting to. So drop us that 5-star team, and on that Spotify, I've dropped in the comments now.
Also, what's the podcast called, Bushy? What's your
know why?
Get invested is it's under the Property Hub, but Get Invested is the long form. The other thing I'll just mention before we close, for anyone who wants to get early dibs on the Property Wealth program that we'll be releasing over the next month or two, if you drop in the post, just put wealth, we'll DM you after the session. Ooh. And of the first 50 that get in, we'll give away 5 free property wealth programs for Oz Property Investor listeners.
Yeah, that's creative.
Should have made a landing page for that.
Right, yeah, I would have. I wasn't quick enough, so I thought if we stick it in a note in the post, that'll be just as good.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need no landing page. You guys can do it. You guys can do it. Well, that's worthwhile, because this is the hardest thing. There's no map, right? There's no clear map of how to do this. And if you have a step-by-step process that you just follow, because also you do the bare facts at the beginning, but you don't know where you're going and how you're going to get there, it's pointless. It's not, you've got to follow the process in a way that makes sense. So throw that in. I'm excited to learn more about that when that's released. I might throw wealth in the comments there.
Yeah, do it. Mate. Do it.
Do it.
Look at this. YouTube as well.
I'm pretty damn keen to jump into the level up exercise too, guys.
Joe, so I suppose you preempted the how do we get more Bushy in our lives. That's how you get more Bushy. You drop wealth. Bushy's dropping wealth left, right, and center. So Bushy, this has been an amazing session. Thank you for all those slides you prepared. Mate, I think you probably had another 50 to go. So sorry I had to cut you off there a little bit. But
why talk when you've got a slide?
No,
sorry, mate, go on. Keep interrupting.
Still a lot of people watching the wealth. People are dropping wealth left, right, and center. So no, thanks for truly appreciate the transparency. Yeah. Thanks everybody.
I love what you guys do. If you anytime, if we want to dive in a bit deeper and do some different scenarios, more than happy to do that, mate. So I'm there at your disposal when and if. But again, I'm very honoured. Love chatting with you guys. I just love your honesty, and you're some of the few guys in property who actually still got a sense of humour and can have a laugh about it as well, which is
sometimes too much. The memes, I don't know. Like I get a bit torn sometimes on those memes, but yeah. People are asking when you're coming back, Marcy from South Australia. You're down in a different part of Australia now, aren't you? Or are you still?
Yeah, we're doing our Manywhere tour at the moment, guys. So we're taste testing different destinations around the country. So it's personal about work. So
what's your favourite
part
so
of my
far? Quickly?
Where we travel, we've done. I've got a dodgy thyroid, so I've drawn lines of latitudes around the country where the temperature's right for, because I can't do heat or humidity anymore. So we've done northwest Tassie. We've done right across Victoria into South Australia and WA. I'm currently talking to you from the beautiful secret spot of Lakes Entrance in East Gippsland, Victoria. Actually, it's a magic spot. It is an absolutely gorgeous part of the world, guys, I've got to say.
It is.
So
yes,
we've got the real
Fine.
pleasure now of doing that.
Was only told about the freebie yesterday and couldn't believe you were on tonight. Must be a sign. Here we go. I think that's the sign.
There we go. That's a sign. Thank you. Look, we got bloody people going wealth crazy. Thank you very much, Bushy Martin. Always a pleasure. Let's go buy a property, guys. See you later.
See you next
Thanks, guys.